So in this video, I want to finish up with soil. All right. So as far as how soil is formed, all right, there's a lot of factors that govern how soil is formed. And remember, soil is formed from when rocks get weathered, and that weathered rock gets mixed with organic material. And so there's a couple of different things that are going to affect that soil formation. All right. One of those is going to be parent material. All right. Where does the rock come from that makes up the soil? Another is time. All right, if soil has a long time to form, it's gonna be a lot thicker and a lot more developed. Climate is going to be a factor. Organisms that live in the soil are going to be a factor, and also slope. Is it on a piece of flat land or is it on a mountainside? All right, so let's go through those one by one. All right, so first of all is parent material. All right, so there's two definitions here: residual soil and transported soil. All right, so residual soil is parent material, is when the parent material is the bedrock. All right, so you can see an example of that right here. All right, so this right here, this is rock down below. All right, and this is soil above, and essentially all this soil is this parent rock down here that just got broken up into smaller bits. All right, it didn't get washed away. It's just, it just, got weathered and it formed right there where it is. All right. All right. So generally you're going to find this type of soil in relatively flat areas where there's not a reason for the soil to run off or to erode away. All right. So the other type is transported soil, and that's when the parent material has been carried from elsewhere and deposited. Okay, so an example of this would be like, let's say you have rocks that are being weathered in the mountains, and some river carries those little bits of rocks downstream and deposits them in the ocean. All right, so the thing is, given enough time, it's possible that that ocean might not be there anymore, and you're going to have these layers of the deposited rock fragments that came from rocks that were a very far distance away. All right, so again, so if you had soil that came from rock like this, that is transported soil because the parent rock that this dirt came from is from somewhere else. Okay, another factor is time. All right, the longer that a soil has been forming, the thicker that it becomes. All right, so what's going to happen is with time, the rocks are going to have more time to break up into smaller and smaller fragments, and also it gives more time for organic material to get in the soil, and that's just going to lead to a lot thicker soil. Okay, one more factor is climate. All right, and you're going to see a big difference between soils that form in warm areas versus cold areas. All right, so one thing about warm, especially warm and wet areas, is that they tend to get a very thick soil because they're predominantly chemically weathered. All right, so remember, whenever the weather is warm, the chemical process that breaks down the rock fragments happens a lot faster. All right, and that's going to create a lot thicker soil. All right, whenever you have a colder climate, all right, these tend to be very thin and mechanically weathered. All right, so what that means is that the only thing that really can go on that's going to break up these rocks is physical forces breaking up these rocks. All right, water banging these rocks against each other, the wind blowing, perhaps blowing some sand across the rocks. But you're not going to have, since it's cold, you don't have the same ability to have chemical processes causing these rocks to break down. And so they tend to be not very thick and not very good for supporting plant life. Another thing that's going to affect soil formation is organisms. All right. So again, one of the major components of soil is organic material. All right. And the number one source for that organic material is plants. All right. So if you're in an area where you've got a lot of where you have a lot of plants that are growing, well, eventually those plants are going to die and become part of the soil, and that's going to affect what the composition of that soil is. All right. again, also animals, every animal eventually dies. It's eventually going to become part of the soil. All right. One thing I want to point out is one of the most important organisms for affecting soil formation are earthworms. All right. If you dig up just about any soil, you're going to find earthworms churning around in it, and they're eating through that organic material, and that tends to break it up, and that's going to end up becoming part of the soil. All right. So the earthworms play a very important role in soil formation. All right. One other thing that's going to affect the ability for soil to form is whether it's on a steep slope or whether you're in a mountainous area or whether it's relatively flat land. All right. So the thing about soil is that gravity is going to work on it. All right. And so if you were to have any soil on this steep rock face right here, what's going to happen is that gravity is just going to take it off the surface of that rock. All right. So if you're in steep areas, a lot of times you just can't form thick soils because they just wash off the rock surface. All right. In contrast, whenever you have relatively flat areas, that soil the rocks can get broken up, and there's not as much reason for this soil to erode away, and so you tend to get a lot thicker soils whenever you have flatter areas. Okay. So one thing about soil is what's called the soil profile. All right. So if you were to take a cross section of the soil, all right, basically if you were just to dig a really deep hole and look at it from the side, all right, you'd see that there's several different layers of the soil. All right. And so different soils are going to have different soil profiles. But one word I want you to get used to is a horizon. All right. So a horizon is just a layer of the soil that all has the same appearance. All right. So, for example, here in this diagram right here, we have 4 horizons. We've got this really dark layer at the very top. All right. Below that, we're going to have this brownish layer right here. All right. So that's this one at the top. We're going to call that the O horizon. We're going to go up into what these letters stand for in just a second. But that's very different from this layer right here. And that's different from this layer down here. So all these layers are what you call horizons. All right. So although there's a lot of more specific types of horizons, in most soils you're going to have these types. All right. So in this picture right here, they actually have what's called an O horizon. All right, and that's not in your notes, but O just stands for organic, which is just going to be a bunch of decayed plant and animal material at the very top. All right. So under that, you're going to have the A horizon. All right. The A horizon is also just what's called the topsoil. All right. That's a mixture of mineral and organic matter, insects, fungi, and microorganisms. All right. So underneath the A horizon, you're going to have the B horizon. All right. So the B horizon is also known as the subsoil. All right. And so the way that the B horizon gets formed is you've got a lot of, you have a lot of small particles that get weathered, and in the A horizon, and water and gravity take those down lower, and they form here. All right. So a lot of times your subsoil is going to tend to be a clay. All right. So that's because it's made up of a lot of very, very fine particles. All right. And below the B horizon is going to be the C horizon. All right. And what the C horizon is partially weathered parent rock. All right. So you're going to have this mixture of small rocks and some stuff that looks like dirt. But this is used to be the rock that formed this soil. So in this last slide, we're just going to go over some things with soil erosion. All right, remember, soil erosion is the process of the small little bits of rock, and soil erosion would be when soil gets transported away. All right, and this could happen either by wind or by water. All right, so some things that are going to affect soil erosion are climate, slope, and vegetation. All right, there's also some human activities that can affect soil erosion, and some of those are removal of natural vegetation, and some of the activities that do that are farming, logging, and construction. All right. So one thing that you might have noticed whenever you see a new neighborhood being built is that one of the first things that they do is they have to cut down all the trees. All right, they have to cut down all the trees and flatten out the land so that they can build the houses. And during that time where you don't have a lot of when you don't have a lot of trees in the ground, that dirt is very susceptible to getting washed away. All right, so construction is one of the big culprits in soils being eroded away. All right, so what are some things that can be done to help prevent soil erosion? All right, windbreaks are one of them. All right, so a windbreak is a layer of trees. All right, so if you look at this picture right here, you see this row of trees, and what that does is whenever the wind blows, it can slow that wind down and prevent a lot of the dirt from being blown away. All right. Another example is terracing of hillsides. All right. So it might be a little hard to see in this picture, but that's basically where you build, instead of having one gentle slope, you put some walls, some retaining walls along the hillside, and that makes it so that there's something to help stop the water from running down the hillside. All right, this is actually a better example of terraced hillsides right here, where you can see that they cut these, instead of like one long slope, you've got a bunch of flatter surfaces. All right, so what this picture shows here is actually plowing along the contour of hills. All right, so instead of your rows going this way, they go against the contour of the hill, so that when water runs down the hill, you have plants that can help prevent some of that erosion. All right, and the last thing is what's called rotating of crops, and that means whenever you have a field, you don't necessarily plant the same plant in the same place year after year. So rotating, when you see that, it sounds like you're turning it upside down. What it means is that you just plant different plants there at different times. So let's say in the spring you might plant wheat, in the summer you might plant corn in that exact same field, and in fall you might plant cotton, for example. All right, and what that does is that by putting different plants in that same area, you end up not depleting the nutrients from the soil quite as much.